Jake Harrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he crawled out from under the massive engine housing. The Zephyrian starship's propulsion system stretched before him like a mechanical cathedral, all gleaming metal and pulsing energy conduits. After 12 years working with these reptilian aliens, he still felt amazed by their technology. But today something was wrong. The resonance frequency is off by 0.03%, Jake called out to his Zephyrian partner Kexdal. The tall, scaled alien turned his yellow eyes toward the human engineer, with what Jake had learned to recognize as annoyance. Human precision obsession again, Kexdal hissed through his translator device. 0.03% is within acceptable limits. The Great Fleet launches tomorrow as scheduled. Jake shook his head and pulled up the holographic display showing the engine's performance data. Red warning indicators flashed across several critical systems. Look at these stress patterns. If we push the engines to full power with this misalignment, the harmonic vibrations will tear the ship apart. Impossible, Kexdal said, but his voice carried less certainty than before. Our calculations are perfect. Zephyrian engineering does not fail. That attitude had frustrated Jake for over a decade. The Zephyrians were brilliant engineers and mathematicians, but their rigid thinking and pride often blinded them to potential problems. They designed their technology to work perfectly under ideal conditions but rarely planned for what might go wrong. Jake had been brought to the Zephyrian homeworld as part of a cultural exchange program. Earth had only recently made contact with galactic civilization, and humans were eager to learn from more advanced species. The Zephyrians, impressed by human creativity and problem-solving abilities, had welcomed Jake into their most important project, developing faster-than-light travel that could revolutionize space exploration. Working together, they had achieved something remarkable. The new drive system could push a starship across vast distances in weeks instead of years. But where Zephyrian designs focused on raw power and efficiency, Jake always insisted on safety systems, backup plans, and fail-safe mechanisms. Your people think too much about failure, Commander Vexitar had once told him. We think about success. Now, standing in the engine room of the prototype starship that would carry 300 Zephyrian crew members on the first test voyage, Jake felt that difference more clearly than ever. The ship was magnificent, incorporating the best of both human and Zephyrian engineering. The faster-than-light drive itself was Jake's design, though the Zephyrians had modified it to squeeze out more performance. I need to run additional tests, Jake said, pulling out his portable scanner. Give me 6 hours to verify the engine alignment. Kexdal's scaled face showed clear irritation. The Fleet Command has approved launch. The Emperor himself will watch the ceremony. You suggest we delay for human paranoia? I suggest we delay to keep 300 people alive, Jake replied firmly. The argument that followed echoed through the engineering deck. Other Zephyrian technicians gathered around, their yellow eyes fixed on the human who dared question their perfect calculations. Jake showed them data, pointed out stress indicators, and explained the physics of harmonic resonance. But their pride was stronger than their logic. The human fears our success, one technician whispered to another, loud enough for Jake to hear. Perhaps he sabotages our triumph, came another voice. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had worked alongside these beings for 12 years, had considered some of them friends, but now he saw suspicion in their eyes, heard doubt in their voices. Fleet Commander Zalthek arrived within the hour, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the engine room lights. Behind him came a full security detail, their weapons clearly visible. Engineer Harrison, the commander said in perfect English, having refused to use a translator. You will explain this delay to our schedule. Jake presented his findings again, more carefully this time. He showed the frequency misalignment, explained the potential for catastrophic system failure, and offered a simple 6-hour delay to recalibrate the engines properly. Commander Zalthek listened in silence, his reptilian features unreadable. When Jake finished, the commander turned to Kexdal and spoke in rapid Zephyrian. Jake caught enough words to understand they were discussing him, not his warnings. The human's concerns are noted, Commander Zalthek finally said. However, our own engineers have certified the ship as ready. We launch as scheduled. Sir, with respect, the physics don't care about schedules, Jake said. If those engines hit full power with this misalignment— Enough! The commander's voice boomed through the chamber. You forget your place, human. This is Zephyrian technology, perfected by Zephyrian minds. Your role here is advisory only. Jake watched helplessly as the engineering teams began final preparations for launch. Every instinct told him disaster was coming, but his warnings fell on deaf ears. The Zephyrians had made their decision, and human concerns would not change it. 24 hours later, Jake stood in the Fleet Command Center watching the prototype starship disappear into faster-than-light travel. The ceremony had been magnificent, with the Emperor himself sending blessing to the brave crew. Champagne flowed, and speeches celebrated this triumph of Zephyrian engineering. Then the emergency signals began. The ship reappeared 3 hours later, but not as a ship. Twisted metal, debris scattered across space, the remains barely recognizable. 300 crew members had died when the engines tore themselves apart at full power, exactly as Jake had predicted. The silence in the command center lasted only moments before the blame began. Human eyes turned to Jake with hatred and rage. Voices rose in accusation. The human engineer had known this would happen. The human engineer had failed to prevent it. The human engineer was responsible. Commander Vextar approached Jake with cold fury in his yellow eyes. Your sabotage has murdered our people, he said quietly. But Zephyrian justice is merciful. You will live, but not among civilized beings. The transport ship dropped Jake on Kepler 442c without ceremony. He watched through the small window as the Zephyrian vessel disappeared into the red sky, leaving him alone on a world that wanted to kill him. The planet was a nightmare of rust-colored rock and poisonous air. Ancient mining equipment scattered across the landscape like metal bones, abandoned when the ore ran out decades ago. Jake's breathing mask fogged up as he surveyed his new home. The Zephyrians had given him basic survival, gear and 3 months of food. After that, he was on his own. His first priority was shelter. The planet's atmosphere was thin but breathable with a filter mask. However, the toxic storms that swept across the surface every few days would kill him in minutes without protection. Jake found an old mining facility built into a cliff face, its thick walls designed to withstand the harsh conditions. The main building was a mess of broken equipment and scattered debris, but the structure was sound. Jake spent his first week clearing out usable space and sealing gaps in the walls. He rigged emergency power from a damaged fusion battery, giving him enough electricity to run life support and basic tools. Water was his next concern. The old mining operation had tapped into an underground aquifer, but the pumps were broken. Jake studied the system for days, tracing pipes and checking connections. The Zephyrians had built the facility, so he understood most of the technology. But they had also built it to be maintained by teams of engineers, not one desperate human. Using spare parts from other broken machines, Jake rebuilt the water pump system. It took him 2 weeks of careful work, but clean water finally flowed from the taps. He celebrated that small victory with a drink of the best water he had ever tasted. Food would run out eventually, so Jake began exploring the abandoned mining tunnels. The Zephyrians had dug deep into the planet's crust, following veins of rare metals. Most tunnels were empty now, but Jake hoped to find something useful. On his 3rd week of exploration, he discovered something extraordinary. Deep in the lowest tunnel, Jake's flashlight illuminated a wall covered in crystalline formations. The crystals were unlike anything he had seen before, glowing with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. When he touched one with his scanner, the readings made no sense. The crystals were generating energy. Jake carefully chipped away a small sample and brought it back to his makeshift laboratory. Every test he ran showed the same impossible result. The crystals produced clean, stable energy with no input required. They seemed to convert the planet's natural radiation into usable power. For the first time since his exile began, Jake felt hope. He returned to the crystal cave with better equipment, mapping the formations and collecting samples. The crystals came in different sizes and intensities. Some produced steady, low-level energy perfect for basic power needs. Others pulsed with much higher output, though they were less stable. Jake began experimenting immediately. He connected small crystals to his power systems, reducing his dependence on the failing fusion battery. The crystals worked perfectly, providing clean energy with no maintenance required. But Jake's engineering mind saw bigger possibilities. He spent months studying the crystals, learning their properties and behavior. The energy they produced was unlike anything in known science. It seemed to tap into quantum fluctuations in space itself, drawing power from the basic structure of reality. Jake built increasingly complex test equipment from salvaged mining machinery, his workshop filled with jury-rigged instruments and experimental devices. Each test taught him more about the crystals and their incredible potential. 6 months into his exile, Jake achieved his first major breakthrough. He successfully used crystal energy to power a gravity manipulation field, something that should have required a starship's reactor. The implications were staggering. These crystals could revolutionize space travel, planetary engineering, and energy production across the galaxy. In the right hands, they could solve the resource shortages that plagued every civilization Jake knew about. While working on his experiments, Jake monitored Zephyrian communication channels. His exile had not included restrictions on receiving broadcasts, and the Zephyrians were too proud to encrypt their public channels. The news was not good for his former captors. The loss of their prototype starship had shaken Zephyrian confidence badly. Other species questioned their engineering abilities, and several trade agreements had been canceled. Worse, their traditional energy sources were showing signs of depletion. The Zephyrian Empire was facing an energy crisis that threatened their entire civilization. Jake listened to increasingly desperate broadcasts as Zephyrian colonies reported power shortages and equipment failures. Their rigid engineering philosophy left them unable to adapt quickly to changing conditions. They had always assumed their resources would last forever. The irony was not lost on Jake. The same people who had exiled him for predicting disaster were now facing exactly the kind of systematic failure he had warned about. Their pride had blinded them to the warning signs, just as it had blinded them to the danger in their starship design. But Jake felt no satisfaction in their suffering. He had spent 12 years working with the Zephyrians, had formed friendships, despite their cultural differences. Watching their civilization crumble brought him no joy. Instead, it motivated him to work harder. Jake expanded his crystal research, building larger and more sophisticated test equipment. He developed new theories about how the crystals interacted with fundamental forces, creating mathematical models that would have impressed his former colleagues. More importantly, he began designing practical applications. The first was a new type of fusion reactor that used crystal energy to maintain stable plasma containment. Traditional fusion required enormous amounts of energy to start and maintain the reaction. Jake's crystal-enhanced design could achieve fusion with a fraction of the usual power requirements. The second was even more ambitious. Jake began work on a revolutionary starship propulsion system that combined crystal energy with human engineering principles. Where Zephyrian designs prioritized raw performance, Jake's concept emphasized safety, efficiency, and reliability. 2 years into his exile, Jake had transformed from a desperate exile into something the galaxy had never seen, a human engineer, with access to technology that could change everything. He was no longer just surviving on Kepler 442c. He was preparing to return to galactic civilization with gifts that would reshape the future. 3 years had passed since Jake's exile began. His underground workshop now looked like something from a science fiction movie, filled with gleaming equipment built from salvaged mining machinery and powered by glowing blue crystals. But today marked his greatest achievement yet. Jake stood before his masterpiece, a sleek starship that bore no resemblance to the bulky Zephyrian vessels he had worked on before. The ship was smaller than most interstellar craft, designed for a crew of 1, but every line spoke of elegant engineering and careful planning. He had named it the Pioneer. The ship's hull was built from mining equipment metal, carefully shaped and welded in his underground facility. But the real innovation lay in its engine system. Jake had spent 2 years perfecting a crystal-powered drive that could achieve faster-than-light travel with unprecedented efficiency and safety. Where Zephyrian ships relied on massive reactors and complex antimatter systems, the Pioneer used a network of carefully tuned crystals to bend space around itself. The energy requirements were a fraction of traditional drives, and the system was inherently stable. Jake had learned from the disaster that led to his exile. Every critical system on the Pioneer had multiple backups. The navigation computer could operate independently from 3 different processors. The life support system had redundant filters, pumps, and air recyclers. If any single component failed, the ship would still function. Most importantly, the crystal drive included automatic safety shutdowns that would prevent the kind of catastrophic failure that destroyed the Zephyrian prototype. If the system detected dangerous stress patterns, it would immediately drop the ship back to normal space and shut down safely. Jake climbed into the pilot's seat and began his final systems check. Green lights appeared across the control panel as each system reported ready status. His hands shook slightly as he realized this moment would determine whether the last 3 years had been brilliant innovation or elaborate self-deception. The Pioneer's engines hummed to life with a sound unlike any starship Jake had ever heard. Instead of the thunderous roar of traditional drives, the crystal system produced a gentle musical tone that seemed to resonate through the ship's structure. Jake engaged the main drive and felt the Pioneer lift smoothly from the underground hangar he had carved from solid rock. The ship rose through the toxic atmosphere of Kepler 442c without strain, its hull shielding protecting him from the planet's harsh environment. In orbit, Jake paused to look back at the world that had been his prison and laboratory. The red, scarred surface showed no sign of the revolutionary technology he had developed in its depths. But that technology was now part of his ship, ready to change the galaxy. Jake plotted a course for the nearest inhabited system and engaged the faster-than-light drive. The Pioneer slipped into hyperspace with none of the violent shaking that characterized Zephyrian ships. Jake felt only a slight tingling sensation as space folded around his vessel. The journey that would have taken a Zephyrian ship 2 weeks was completed in 4 days. Jake emerged from hyperspace near Gamma Outpost, a neutral trading station that served as a meeting point for dozens of different species. The station's traffic control immediately hailed his ship, demanding identification and flight plans. "This is Jake Harrison aboard the Starship Pioneer, requesting permission to dock," he replied. The silence that followed stretched for several minutes. Finally, the traffic controller responded with obvious confusion in his voice. "Pioneer, please repeat your species identification. Our databases show no match for Jake Harrison or human designation." Jake smiled grimly. 3 years was a long time in galactic politics. Humanity's brief contact with galactic civilization had apparently been forgotten after the Zephyrian incident. "I am human, from Earth. I request standard visitor docking privileges." Another long pause. Jake could imagine the frantic database searches happening aboard the station. "Pioneer, you are cleared for docking bay 7. Please prepare for customs inspection upon arrival." The Pioneer docked smoothly at the station, its advanced maneuvering systems making the process effortless. Jake sealed his ship and walked through the airlock into Gamma Outpost. The station was exactly as he remembered. A chaotic mix of different species trading, arguing, and conducting business in a dozen languages. The familiar sights and sounds of galactic civilization felt strange after 3 years of solitude. Jake's arrival did not go unnoticed. Within hours, word had spread through the station's communication networks. A human had appeared from nowhere, piloting a ship with technology no one recognized. The ship's energy signatures were unlike anything in known databases. Representatives from major civilizations began arriving at the station within days. The Altarian Federation sent a diplomatic team. The Centauri Trade Guild dispatched their best negotiators. Even the mysterious Void Runners emerged from their usual secrecy to investigate. But it was the Zephyrian delegation that interested Jake most. Commander Vextar arrived aboard a battle cruiser, the same officer who had pronounced Jake's exile 3 years earlier. Age had not been kind to the Zephyrian. His scales were duller, his movements slower, and his eyes held a weariness that spoke of desperate times. Jake agreed to meet with him in the station's main conference room. The two sat across from each other at a simple metal table, with 3 years of history between them. "You should not have survived," Vextar said without preamble. "Your people's calculations were wrong about that too," Jake replied calmly. Vextar's reptilian features showed something that might have been shame. "Our empire is dying, human. Our energy reserves are nearly exhausted. Our colonies are failing. We face extinction within a generation." "I know," Jake said. "I've been monitoring your broadcasts. Then you know why I'm here." Vextar leaned forward. "Your ship's energy signature shows technology beyond our understanding. We need that technology. Name your price." Jake studied the alien who had condemned him to exile. The proud, arrogant commander was gone, replaced by a desperate representative of a failing civilization. "My price is not something you can pay," Jake said finally. "But perhaps we can discuss an alternative arrangement." Other species representatives watched from the shadows as Jake Harrison, the human engineer they had forgotten, began negotiations that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The man they had abandoned was now the key to their survival. Jake sat in the center of Gamma Outpost's largest conference room, surrounded by representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. The circular table placed him at the focal point, with alien faces turned toward him from every direction. 3 days had passed since his arrival, and word of his revolutionary technology had spread across known space. Ambassador Thyra of the Altarian Federation spoke first, her blue-skinned features arranged in what Jake recognized as diplomatic politeness. "Engineer Harrison, the Federation offers you full citizenship, a research facility on our capital world, and 1 billion credits for exclusive access to your propulsion technology." "The Centauri Trade Guild doubles that offer," interrupted Director Colvan before Jake could respond. The insectoid alien's mandibles clicked rapidly in excitement. 2 billion credits plus a permanent seat on our governing council and trade rights throughout guild space. Jake listened quietly as the bidding war escalated. Each species offered more wealth, more power, more privileges than the last. The Void Runners promised him knowledge of ancient technologies. The Rigelian Confederacy offered him command of an entire fleet. Even smaller civilizations made desperate proposals, offering their homeworlds entire treasuries for a chance at his crystal drive technology. Through it all, Commander Vextar remained silent. The Zephyrian watched the proceedings with growing dismay as his former enemies made offers his dying empire could never match. "Enough," Jake said finally, raising his hand to quiet the room. The desperate voices fell silent immediately. "I appreciate your offers, but you all misunderstand the situation." He stood and activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy's current state. Red zones marked areas suffering from energy shortages, resource depletion, and economic collapse. The red areas were growing larger each year. "Look at this map," Jake continued. "Every one of your civilizations is facing the same crisis. Your traditional energy sources are running out. Your expansion has stopped. Your people are struggling to maintain the technology that keeps your societies functioning." Murmurs of uncomfortable agreement rippled around the table. Jake had spoken the truth they all knew, but rarely acknowledged publicly. "My crystal technology could solve these problems," Jake said, "but not if it belongs to just one species. The energy crisis affects everyone, so the solution must be available to everyone." Ambassador Thyra leaned forward. "What are you proposing?" Jake smiled and activated another holographic display. This one showed a detailed organizational chart unlike anything the assembled representatives had seen before. "I propose the creation of the Galactic Engineering Cooperative," Jake announced, "a multi-species organization dedicated to sharing technological advancement for mutual benefit. Every member species contributes their expertise and receives access to breakthrough technologies, like my crystal drive." The room erupted in surprised voices. Several representatives immediately began objecting, but Jake continued over their protests. "The cooperative would operate under human engineering principles," he said. "Open collaboration, peer review, and ethical design standards. No more building technology that prioritizes performance over safety. No more keeping life-saving innovations secret for competitive advantage. Director Colvan's insectoid features showed confusion. This makes no economic sense. You could become the wealthiest being in the galaxy by selling your technology to the highest bidder. Wealth means nothing if civilization collapses, Jake replied. I've spent 3 years watching your energy crisis grow worse while your governments pretended the problem would solve itself. Individual greed got us into this mess. Only cooperation can get us out. He activated a third display showing detailed plans for crystal-powered infrastructure. Space stations, planetary power grids, and interstellar transportation networks all designed around his revolutionary energy source. The cooperative would oversee the responsible development and deployment of crystal technology, Jake explained. We would build the infrastructure needed to support a truly galactic civilization. Fast, safe travel between worlds. Unlimited clean energy for every inhabited system. The end of resource wars and energy shortages. The room fell silent as the representatives studied Jake's proposals. The scope of his vision was staggering. He was offering to fundamentally transform galactic civilization. Ambassador Thyra spoke carefully. The Federation has never entered into such an arrangement. Our independence is sacred to us. Independence is worthless if you're all independently dying, Jake said bluntly. The energy crisis will destroy your civilizations one by one, unless you work together to solve it, Commander Vextar finally spoke. What of species that have wronged you in the past? His voice carried the weight of guilt and desperation. Jake looked directly at the Zephyrian commander. The cooperative judges species by their willingness to contribute and collaborate, not by their past mistakes. Everyone gets a chance to help build the future. Over the following days, Jake met with each delegation privately. He showed them detailed technical specifications, demonstrated small-scale crystal devices, and answered hundreds of questions about his proposed cooperative. Chang, Altarians worried about sharing their advanced materials science. Jake showed them how crystal technology could enhance their existing capabilities rather than replace them. The Centauri feared losing their trading advantages. Jake demonstrated how unlimited energy would create new markets and opportunities across the galaxy. Most difficult were the smaller civilizations that had survived by jealously guarding their few technological advantages. Jake convinced them that cooperation would give them access to innovations they could never develop alone. The breakthrough came when the Void Runners publicly endorsed the cooperative. Their ancient reputation for wisdom carried enormous weight throughout the galaxy. Within hours, other species began announcing their support. The Rigelian Confederacy joined first, followed by the Centauri Trade Guild. The Altarian Federation held out for 2 more days before agreeing to participate. Smaller civilizations lined up to join an organization that promised them equal access to revolutionary technology. Even the Zephyrians, swallowing their pride, formally requested membership in the cooperative. Jake stood once more in the conference room, but now the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of desperate competitors, he faced potential partners in the greatest engineering project in galactic history. The Galactic Engineering Cooperative is officially established, he announced. Now we get to work building the future. 5 years had passed since Jake Harrison was abandoned on Kepler 442c. Now he stood on the bridge of the largest starship ever built, watching a galaxy transformed by human ingenuity and alien cooperation. The ship was called Unity, a massive vessel built by 12 different species working together. Its crystal-powered engines could cross the galaxy in weeks, carrying diplomatic teams, engineers, and supplies to worlds that had never dreamed of such connections. The ship represented everything the Galactic Engineering Cooperative had achieved. Incoming. Transmission from the Altarian sector, announced Lieutenant Kara Wong, Jake's human assistant. After the cooperative's success, Earth had eagerly sent more humans to help with the Great Galactic Project. The new power grid is online and running at full capacity. Jake nodded with satisfaction. The Altarian homeworld had been the cooperative's first major infrastructure project. Their old fusion plants had been failing for decades, forcing rolling blackouts across their cities. Now crystal-powered generators provided unlimited clean energy to every home and factory on the planet. Any problems with the installation? Jake asked. None reported, sir. The Altarian engineers say the system is running smoother than their old plants ever did. That was the beauty of crystal technology combined with human engineering principles. The power generators were designed with multiple safety systems and automatic maintenance protocols. They would run for decades without human intervention, and if something did go wrong, the fail-safes would prevent dangerous failures. The bridge's main screen displayed a map of the galaxy showing the cooperative's achievements. Green dots marked worlds now powered by crystal technology. Blue lines traced the new transportation network that connected distant civilizations. Red zones that had once indicated energy crises were disappearing as crystal infrastructure spread across known space. Director Harrison, we have another request from the Zephyrian delegation, said Commander Liu Chen from the communications station. Jake smiled at the title. The cooperative had voted him Director of Engineering 5 years ago, making him the first human to hold a position of galactic authority. It was ironic that the species who had exiled him now looked to him for leadership. Put them through, Jake said. Commander Vexitar appeared on the screen, but he looked very different from the proud officer who had condemned Jake to exile. The Zephyrian's scales were brighter, his posture straighter, and his eyes held hope, instead of desperation. Director Harrison, Vexitar said, bowing his head in the respectful greeting the Zephyrians had adopted since joining the cooperative. I bring good news from our core worlds. I'm listening, Jake replied. The crystal generators you helped us install have exceeded all expectations. Our energy production is now higher than it was at the peak of our empire. Our colonies are thriving again. Our people speak of a new golden age. Jake felt genuine happiness at the news. Despite everything that had happened between them, he had never wanted to see the Zephyrian people suffer. More importantly, Vexitar continued, our engineers have completed the safety modifications you requested for our starship designs. The new Zephyrian fleet incorporates human redundancy principles and fail-safe systems. We will never again lose a ship to preventable mechanical failure. That was perhaps Jake's greatest victory. The cooperative had not just shared technology, it had spread human engineering philosophy throughout the galaxy. The idea that safety was more important than performance had revolutionized how alien species designed their technology. Excellent work, Commander, Jake said. I look forward to seeing your new ships in action. The transmission ended, and Jake turned to look out at the stars. The Unity was approaching the Rigelian system, where they would oversee the installation of a new crystal-powered shipyard. The facility would build the next generation of cooperative vessels, designed by teams that included engineers from every member species. Director, there's something else, Lieutenant Wong said quietly. Earth Command has sent a priority message. Jake's expression grew serious. Contact with Earth had been limited since the cooperative's formation. His homeworld was still adjusting to humanity's sudden prominence in galactic affairs. What do they want? Jake asked. They're requesting permission to send a full diplomatic mission to join the cooperative. Apparently, they've been watching our achievements and want to contribute Earth's resources to the project. Jake laughed, a sound that carried both irony and satisfaction. Tell Earth Command their request is approved. We can always use more engineers. The Unity's engines hummed with the musical tone that characterized crystal propulsion. Jake had never grown tired of that sound. It reminded him of the discovery that had changed everything, found in the depths of a hostile world that was supposed to be his grave. A junior officer approached with a datapad. Sir, we've received status reports from all active cooperative projects. The Centauri trade network is expanding ahead of schedule. The Void Runner knowledge-sharing program has identified 17 new worlds suitable for colonization, and the Rigelian Defense Fleet reports no energy shortages for the first time in 40 years. Jake reviewed the reports with satisfaction. The galaxy was healthier and more connected than it had ever been. Wars over resources had become things of the past. Scientific collaboration had accelerated technological development beyond anyone's expectations. Species that had been enemies For centuries, were now working together on projects that benefited everyone. Director Harrison, Commander Liu called from his station. We're receiving a general broadcast from Gamma Outpost. They're dedicating a new monument. The main screen showed a crowd gathered around a tall crystal sculpture that pulsed with soft, blue light. At its base was a simple inscription. To the engineer who turned abandonment into hope and exile into unity. Jake felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the ship's life support systems. He had been thrown away by one species, forgotten by others, and left to die alone. But he had used that abandonment to build something greater than any empire. The human engineer they had abandoned had indeed rebuilt their future, not through conquest or domination, but through the simple human belief that cooperation was stronger than competition, that sharing knowledge was better than hoarding it, and that the future belonged to those willing to work together to build it. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders still to be discovered and challenges still to be overcome. But now it faced those challenges united, guided by human wisdom and powered by human innovation. Jake Harrison had found his way home at last, not to a single world but to a galaxy where human values had taken root among the stars.